Hello. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here. Oh, we can see the ugly hole in the wall. Let's not look at that. Today I am doing a little bit of a book haul because I acquire books constantly, way faster than I read them, which is bad, but I do it anyway. Some of these are books that I got for Christmas. Is it a little late to be doing a Christmas book haul? Yes. Am I doing it anyway? Yes. And then some of these are just books that I picked up myself. So that's what we're doing today. To start with, books I got for Christmas. The first book that I received for Christmas is called This Is Where You Belong: Finding Home Wherever You Are by Melody Warnick. This is a nonfiction, I guess, like sort of self-help book that I've heard good things about. So I asked for it for Christmas and my parents gave it to me. Thank you very much. And it's just sort of about learning to love the place where you live and learning to like find community. And I thought that is a really interesting concept sociologically and like practically applicable to my life. I've lived in the city where I am for like 3.5 years, but I still have like work to do in terms of finding community in my own life. So I thought that this book may be helpful in that respect. And it's just like interesting sociologically, like the time that we're in, like how many people are living in a different place than they grew up, how frequently people move around. And obviously this book came out pre-2020, but I'm sure it will be interesting to think about these concepts too in light of how the last couple of years events have affected how people think about where they want to live and how they find community in those places. I kind of burnt out a little on self-help last year, but this one I'm excited to read. So that is This Is Where You Belong by Melody Warnick. Next up are a few books that my younger brother got me for Christmas. This is just like a Bible study he picked up for me called We Saved You a Seat. It's about like friendship and stuff. Don't know too much about it, but looking forward to getting into that at some point. And then he also got me something I specifically had on my Christmas list, which is Zen in the Art of Writing by Ray Bradbury. There's still so much Ray Bradbury in the world that I haven't read, and that makes me like very exciting because I think he's just like one of the best writers ever. I think the first thing I ever read of his was, hang on, where is my Ray Bradbury stuff? It's way up at the top. The first thing I think I ever read by Ray Bradbury, that I remember anyway, is Dandelion Wine, which is like a sort of slightly, barely, not really magical, like sort of coming of age story. And it's very much kind of like vignettes, like the chapters, some of them kind of feel like barely tied together, but the writing is so beautiful. Like every sentence is just so rich. Also, I've read Fahrenheit 451, which is also great. So anyway, I really wanted to read this book, which is sort of like essays by Ray Bradbury about writing, because I love reading about writers, advice that they have about writing or just about their lives. But sometimes you read these books and you're like, I don't actually know if this person is a good writer, like especially like can they write fiction, if that's what they're like talking about writing. Like for example, when I read Stephen King's writing memoir, I hadn't actually read any of Stephen King's novels. I have since read a couple of them. I do think he's a good writer. His writing, like his books, are maybe not super for me. Anyway, all that to say, it's nice to like read writing advice from somebody you know you really like and really respect and like enjoy how they write. So I'm really excited to read this sometime soon. I'm sure it will be really interesting and informative. So that's Zen in the Art of Writing by Ray Bradbury. The other book that my brother got me for Christmas is The Last Battle by C.S. Lewis. These editions are the ones that my mom had around the house when we were growing up. And I decided a little while ago that I wanted to collect them because I just think they're like the best ones. Like, I just love the way these covers look. And so I have found a couple of them just at like thrift stores. I have The Horse and His Boy, and I have The Silver Chair. But this, I've never seen a copy of like these editions in such like pristine quality as this copy that he found at a thrift store for me. I think it was at a thrift store. Oh, here's a receipt. I'm probably not supposed to see this. Oh no, wait. Never mind. That's a receipt from something else. I think that's actually a receipt that I left in someone's Christmas gift. I was so bad for that with books this year. I don't know why. Anyway. So I don't actually know what these editions are, which is stupid. I just know what they look like. Montana Lions. First published in 1980. Yes, I love them. I love C.S. Lewis. I really want to do a reread of the Chronicles of Narnia sometime soon, and then I want to read, shoot, I don't know what it's called. Planet Narnia. I think it's called Planet Narnia, which is like literary criticism, basically suggesting that each of the books in the Chronicles of Narnia corresponds to like one of the planets / gods, you know, like Jupiter and Mars and those, because people like for a long time had been trying to figure out like what each of the books sort of like represents. So I've been very curious about that book for a long time. I don't have it, but at some point I want to reread the Chronicles of Narnia, which I was obsessed with as a child. Obsessed. And yeah, I want to reread them and then read that so I can like think about it clearly for myself with the books fresh in my mind. My one problem with collecting these editions that I really love and think are so wonderful is that I really, really like to mark up my books. I don't write in them a lot in terms of like notes. I mostly just like underline and side bracket and stuff. But I'm like, should I mark those editions up? Probably not. So then do I need other ones that I can mark up? But if I can't read these, like, what's the point? I don't know. Let me know what you think. I have like mixed feelings about like old editions and like nice editions of books because I kind of just want to not feel bad about writing in them. Anyway, that's my personal problem. We all have our hang-ups. I suppose that's a fairly mild one in the scheme of things. So those are the books my brother gave me. Thank you very much. So the next few are from a lovely friend of mine who is the giftiest person in the world. I don't know if she wants me to mention her by name on YouTube, so I won't. But you know who you are, and thank you very much. She's always so generous to me because my birthday is right before Christmas and she gives me so much stuff and it's like, well, it's for your birthday and for Christmas. She's like a wonderful, wonderful gift giver. So anyway, she gave me a few books. One of them is this graphic novel of Macbeth, which is cool. Haven't read it yet, but it looks interesting. This is like kind of what the art style looks like, if you can see. We went and saw Macbeth at Shakespeare on the Saskatchewan this past summer together. So this just makes me think of that, and that makes me happy. So yeah, that's Macbeth. And she also gave me this book that I'm currently like halfway through, maybe a little more than halfway through, which is Ella Minnow P. by Mark Dunn, who apparently is a playwright. This book you always see on like lists of books written with an interesting structure. The idea of the book is that as it goes along, letters from the alphabet are gradually dropped because it takes place on this island where Nevin Nolop lived, and he's the one who came up with the famous sentence that uses all of the letters in the alphabet. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. And they have a monument to him in this town where everyone speaks in a very, like, wordy fashion. They all have huge vocabularies. Letter writing is, like, a huge thing, and this is a novel in letters. And it says that right on the cover. And the letters start falling off of the monument, like the letters from this sentence. And the powers that be decide that that means that they shouldn't use those letters anymore. The thing I didn't really realize about this book is that it's a lot about, like, government overreach and silly laws and freedom of expression and freedom of speech. And so this is a really interesting time to be reading this novel. I just thought this was going to be like a fun, quirky little book, and it is that, but it's also like I said, this is an interesting time to be reading it specifically. So that one I've already got a start on. The other book that my friend gave me is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, which is a classic of more modern literature, but I have never read it. I always thought that it probably wasn't really for me because it just sounds very dark. You know, it's about a young woman with some pretty severe, like, mental illness. So I never thought I was interested in it, but then my friend was reading it this past year and, like, read some passages to me from it, and I was just, like, floored by the writing. Also, this edition is so pretty. It has, like, butterflies inside. So I am really excited to read this soon and get a little Sylvia Plath in my life. Like, okay, listen to this. By 9 in the morning, the fake country wet freshness that somehow seeped in overnight evaporated like the tail end of a sweet dream. Mirage gray at the bottom of their granite canyons, the hot streets wavered in the sun. The car tops sizzled and glittered, and the dry, cindery dust blew into my eyes and down my throat. It's very descriptive. So anyway, and this is such a pretty edition. I think I already said that. Anyway, thank you very much for this gift, and I'm looking forward to reading this very soon. The last book that I got as a gift is from my friend's mom, who I happened to also see over the holidays, and she's also a very generous gift-giving person, and she gave me The Gospel According to Peanuts. I love Peanuts cartoons. I read them when I was a kid and liked them, but, like, as I've gotten older, like, every time I read them, I just appreciate them more. And so this is just kind of, I don't know too much about it, but I think it's sort of using the comics as a jumping off point for, like, devotional thoughts. So that will be really interesting. I think Charles Schulz had a very, like, interesting and somewhat fraught relationship with Christianity, so it'll be interesting to see what this author makes of it. I read a couple years back, maybe more than a couple, maybe 3, I don't remember exactly, Schulz and Peanuts, a biography by David Michaelis. Don't know if I'm saying that wrong. His name is literally spelled Michael Is. David Michael Is. This is big, fat biography, but it's so interesting. Like I said when I was talking about the Ray Bradbury book, I love reading, like, the life stories of, like, creative people, and this was just fascinating to read about his work and how it came about and how his faith played into that and interacted with that and how it affected his family life. So yes, I highly recommend this biography also. So yeah, that's The Gospel According to Peanuts with Snoopy on the cover. How can you go wrong? So that is it for the books that I got for Christmas. Again, thank you to those who were so generous. The next category of books are ones that I got from the little free library. There's one close to my house that I have taken stuff to a couple times, but never actually found anything in, I don't think. But it was stocked really nicely recently, and I found a couple of books there that I wanted. So this first one is Collected Short Stories by Greene. I read one of his novels in college. This is The Power and the Glory by Greene, which is kind of about like a drunken priest in Mexico. It's kind of a bleak book, but it was really interesting, and I think about it fairly often. And so I've always been curious to read more Greene, and like my understanding is, and I could be wrong on this, someone wanted to sell me a phone plan. I declined. I always feel bad. Anyway, I was talking about Greene and Power and the Glory, which I read. So I should look this up instead of just spouting things off like a fool. But I think that Greene wrote like some spy novels and stuff like that. Like I think he was fairly prolific. I don't know very much about him, but I'm curious to read more. So I thought a short story collection may be kind of a nice place to start. I don't read that many short story collections, but usually when I do, I really enjoy them. So I should read more of them. That is one thing that I picked up at the Little Free Library. The other thing I picked up is this quite recent book called 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. When did this come out? It's very recent. Oh, 2021. Okay, I'm correct. It is recent. This is supposed to be like a feminist retelling of the Iliad, or, you know, sort of the events around the Trojan War, focusing on the women in the story. So I'm very curious about it because I just read the Iliad. It's way up on the top shelf. I'm gonna get it because it's pretty. Yes, I just finished reading the Iliad over the last few months of 2021, which I did with a friend, which was a good way to do it because I'd been meaning to read it for many, many years and never got around to it because epic poetry is like sometimes a bit of a hard sell when you could read like a mystery novel or something instead. But I'm very glad that I read it. I am keeping my expectations from this book a little bit low. Boy, here I am ready to get myself in trouble. I'm just hoping this isn't like feminist in an obnoxious way. I hope it's just a good story about women. That's all I want. So we'll see. But I want to read this soon just because I've been kind of in that like ancient Greek space in my reading from reading the Iliad. So that's the other book that I got from the Little Free Library. The rest of the books that I got, I have a little stack here yet to go. All of these I got from my local Mission thrift store. Mission thrift stores are thrift stores, rather obviously, that support the Bible League of Canada. And I've been volunteering at the one in my city for a few years now. I usually work in the book section, which is really fun, but also not good for my poor bookshelves that are overflowing. But it is a really good organization that does a lot of good locally and around the world in terms of distributing Bibles, doing literacy work, all kinds of other good charitable work. So I really like supporting that organization. I've recently joined the board at my local Mission thrift store, and so if you have one where you live in your area, definitely check it out. They should have books. I have picked up a few things over the last, I don't know, number of months. I'm not sure how far back these books go. The first one is this big pretty book. It is called I Remember Laura, and the subtitle is America's Favorite Storyteller as Remembered by Her Family, Friends, and Neighbors by Stephen W. Hines. If you don't know Laura Ingalls Wilder, she wrote Little House on the Prairie and that whole series, which those are the first like actual novels I remember my parents reading to me in my life. I remember my parents reading them to my older brother and I, so I was probably like, I don't know, maybe. Anyway, that's the first like non like picture book like read aloud that I particularly remember, and I loved those stories. They're pioneer stories, frontier stories about a family in the United States. This is the first one, Little House in the Big Woods. So it's Wisconsin in the 1870s is when the first book starts. And so it's about Laura Ingalls' childhood, and then the books go on up to her like young married life. They're really classics. They have fun little illustrations in them. But anyway, there are parts of Laura Ingalls' life, and I think including some of the most difficult parts of her life, that her books don't cover, because they are written for quite a young audience, and I don't know, I think maybe at the time that she wrote the books compared to now, people were like less excited about discussing their personal trauma and stuff. And so I'm curious if maybe some of these reflections by other people about her will sort of cover some of the parts of her life that her novels don't. And like also like her later life too, I imagine, will be reflected here more, like her writing life as opposed to those like early years that I know so well from the stories. So anyway, I'd never heard of this book before, but I saw it at the thrift store and was curious about it, and I think it'll be like, the print is quite large. Oops, there goes the receipt. So, and there's like photos and stuff. So yeah, I'm curious about what that will be like, and it's in really, really beautiful shape. So a good thrift find. Tea time. The next book is The Goldentresses of the Dead by Ellen Bradley, which matches my scrunchie so well. The final book in the Flavia de Luce mystery series. If you're not familiar, The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie is the first novel in the series, and you do need to read these in order because they do build on each other somewhat. And like, there will be spoilers in later books for some things if you read them out of order. But basically, this series follows an 11-year-old girl who lives in post-World War II England in kind of like a tumble-down manor house. She lives with her father and her two older sisters, and they're sort of like genteelly poor. But there is a chemical laboratory in the house from one of her ancestors, and she's like obsessed with chemistry. And that leads her into solving mysteries as an amateur detective. I think this is the 10th book in the series. Can't remember for sure. I read the very first book and then I listened to the rest of the series on audio on Libby. But then when I saw the last one at the thrift store, I decided that I was going to finish the series the way I started it and read this one. And they're just such like nice little books that I couldn't resist when I saw this same edition. So I have been reading this series over the past couple years. I binged the previous two, like right one after the other, but other than that, I've been kind of like spreading them out because I really enjoy them. Flavia is like funny and lovable, but like not in a, oh, she's like so perfect kind of way, in more of a like, she's kind of an awful child, but like, also, she hasn't had the easiest circumstances, but also she's like very intelligent. So anyway, I love Flavia. And I'm excited and a little bit sad to read this last book. I think there's a novella also that I don't think there's an audiobook for that I could find on Libby. So I haven't read that. But other than that, this is the last book in the series. So definitely planning to read that this year. And then I will be a little sad that it's over, but I'll be glad to have read them all. So that is The Goldentresses of the Dead by Ellen Bradley. This is Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. Who can relate? I have never read any Frederick Bachman. I hear all the book podcasters and Bookstagram people raving about him all the time. His book Beartown, which is about hockey, but it's not about Canada. It's about one of the Scandinavian countries, I think. Maybe it's set in Finland. I can't remember 100%. Anyway, that one is very popular. I haven't heard as much about this one, and I didn't actually know what it was about. But then I happened to look at the description, and the setup involves a hostage situation at like a real estate open house. And that setup reminded me so much of Bel Canto, which I talked about in my last video, my favorite books of 2021 video. Bel Canto, yay. That as soon as I read that, I was like, oh, okay. Take my money. Mission Thrift Store. Have my money so I can have this book. I for sure could have found an audiobook version of this, and so usually if I know it'll be easy to find the audiobook, I will not purchase the book. That's how I'm trying to like curb my spending a little bit. I mostly only buy ones that I think will be harder to find on audio, but I so enjoyed the experience of reading Bel Canto in print, and this seemed like it might be similar, that I just decided that I wanted the book. Also, it matches 1,000 Ships. Wow. That will be probably my first Frederick Bachman, unless I randomly listen to one of his other books on audio before I get to reading that one in print. Not sure when I'll actually get to that one. The next book is Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard. I first encountered Annie Dillard in college. We read parts of her book about writing, The Writing Life. Could hold this not in front of my face. We read parts of The Writing Life for a creative nonfiction class that I took, which was the only really like writing class that I took in college. And it was interesting. I would like to go back and read the whole thing at some point. This is classified as autobiography, so I guess that's what it is. But every hipster, I mean that not necessarily in a mean way, but every like hipster humanities student was forever talking about Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. And like book people talk about this all the time. I don't even know what this is. Is this nonfiction or fiction? Help. I'll look it up. I kind of think this is more like memoir, but I don't really know. But it seems to be like a seminal text for people who are like interested in writing at all. And it won the Pulitzer Prize. So congrats, Annie Dillard. Good for you. Now, speaking of Bel Canto, we have more Ann Patchett. We have more Ann Patchett, people. Again, could I probably have found an audiobook of this? Very possibly. But again, I liked reading Bel Canto in print so much that I decided I wanted to read more Ann Patchett in print. This is called The Patron Saint of Liars, and neither that title nor the setup of the book, which is like a home for unwed mothers in the 60s. Oh, the 60s. That makes it a little more interesting. Neither of those things would have grabbed me. Like, just based on those things, I would not have picked this book up. But it's Ann Patchett. And I loved Bel Canto so much. I'm so curious what the rest of her writing is like. So here we go. Again, don't know when I'm going to get to this one, but I really want to get to this one. So we'll see. And finally, dinosaurs. If you recognize the name Arthur Conan Doyle, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, this is by the author of Sherlock Holmes. He wrote other things, many various other things, including some like adventure story type stuff. So this features not Sherlock Holmes, but rather Professor Challenger, and at the back of the book it says he's an eccentric paleontologist on a suspense-filled search for prehistoric creatures in the wilds of the Amazon. He and some other guys are out there in the jungle when their bridge to civilization collapses and the explorers find themselves marooned among dinosaurs and savage ape people. So another one where I'm kind of keeping my expectations low, but I'm very curious to see what this may be like. If it's gonna give me like Jules Verne vibes. Hopefully more fun than that, honestly. Didn't love Journey to the Center of the Earth or 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but I'm very curious. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle obviously was brilliant, also kind of a weirdo, so I'm very curious to see his take on Jurassic Park. Which is also a great book. Great book. Okay. So that's it. That's the last one. That's the end of the book haul. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if there are any books here that you have read and loved or hated. Let me know if there's anything you think I need to read immediately. Hope you are enjoying whatever you're reading. If not, read something else. Okay, bye.